You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
J.T. Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Hobb,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
Sondra Helene.
Thanks for tuning into Author Stories. We've got a fantastic show for you today. But before we get started, I'd like to tell you about some sponsors. Jeff Sweat and his new book, Mayfly. It's actually a duology that's out now. You can join in the Mayfly quest at mayflybook.com. Start your journey. Long ago, a mysterious plague hit the city of L.A., decimating the population. Only children were immune. Ever since, no one lives past 17, and no one knows why. There are clues all over the city. Only the most determined will recognize them, and only the cleverest will be able to solve them. Life is short. Can you outlive it? Go to mayflybook.com to join the Mayfly quest today. And thanks to our friend Ernie Lindsay for sponsoring the show. His Sarah, the complete series, is on sale now. There's a link to it in the show notes. In Sarah, the complete series, a peaceful but hectic life is shattered for a mother and her children, along with her friends and colleagues, by kidnapping, murder, and vengeance. Those seeking retribution will go to any lengths. This bargain price collection contains over 600 pages of thrilling suspense, which includes all 3 novels in the Sarah series and the companion novella. Sarah, the complete series by Ernie Lindsay. Now stay tuned for the show. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Sondra Helene on the show with me today. Sondra has a fantastic new book. It's called Appearances, and guys, this book is amazing. You're going to love it. I have enjoyed reading it. It has spoken to me on a number of levels. I'm really excited to talk about it. Welcome to the show, Sondra.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here today.
Sondra, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Okay. Well, it's funny because I didn't start out wanting to be a novelist, but I did love my English classes in high school, and my teachers told me that I was a good writer. But the only writing I did when I was younger was like in my diary and journals. And I didn't start really writing until I was in my 40s. But I always loved reading, and I like reading books inspired by true stories.
Nice. We are big in our house. We're big fans of true stories and the memoir and biographies. And what was it about things inspired by true events and true stories that you love so much?
In terms of reading other people's books?
Yeah.
I liked learning about how people became how people thought about things and how people turned out the way that they did. I love reading memoirs. I'm reading one right now, and it's about someone who grew up in the Philippines. And I like reading stories about cultures and people that I don't necessarily know that much about.
Right. Was there a particular story that really sticks out in your mind that really made you fall in love with that type of book and story?
There was a story that I read about almost 15 years ago, and it was Dani Shapiro's memoir called Slow Motion, and it was about her life when she was in her 20s, a young woman, and her parents had gotten into a car accident, and how her life evolved from that. So I love that memoir.
Was there a lot of reading in the house you grew up in? Did your parents encourage it, and was it something that was expected of you as a kid?
Yes, my parents, we read a lot, but in those days when I would read books by like Danielle Steele and and just books like that. My father liked mystery books, and my mother liked books by Danielle Steele. They encouraged us to read and to do well in school. It was always important for us to do well in school. I had a sister and a brother and myself.
Gotcha. As you start going through school and you start thinking about the trajectory of your life and the path you're going to choose, what was your idea of your future as you go through high school and college? What were you planning to do?
Well, I graduated high school, and I actually had thought about being a newscaster. But in those days, my parents said, well, it's good to get a safe job, a job that is not as competitive. And so that's how I was brought up and how I was taught. So I became a speech and language pathologist. And then I started working with people, teaching them stress management techniques. So I became a speech therapist, and I worked in hospitals in Boston. And most of my patients were patients who had strokes or other type of neurological injuries.
For a writer, that has to be fertile ground to work in as you're interacting with people in these desperate situations. A lot of times, that for a writer, someone who tells human stories, that has to be a profound experience.
Yes, it was. I mean, I found that I was really good at that. I was really good at helping people, helping them, to the best of their ability to regain their speech, and also connecting with them on a human level and connecting with them. We bonded. A lot of my patients and I bonded. Sometimes I would do home care treatments, and I would go to their homes, and they would, want to feed me, give me food, and bring me in as part of the family. Family was always very important to me growing up, and it still is. So I just enjoyed all my time being a speech and language therapist. And then I worked until I had my daughter, and then I worked part-time, and then I became a full-time mom for a while and started doing volunteer work, but mostly in hospital settings, doing fundraisers for various aspects of different departments in the hospital.
Before you started working on this novel, you have done some other writing. What was it that got you to start thinking about writing again?
Well, what happened is my 43-year-old sister, who never smoked, got diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer.
Wow.
And it was very hard for me to understand that and cope with that. I mean, we were walking one day, and she said we were doing our exercise, and she ate healthy, she didn't smoke, she exercised regularly, and her diagnosis to me and our whole family was a shock. So I didn't know, she lived for 2.5 years with that, so I didn't know how to deal with that, and I started writing. And also during the doctor's appointments, that I went to every doctor's appointment with her, I would take copious notes, and then I would read them back to her at night. And by the end of all of her treatments, I had notebooks filled with notes, and I signed up for writing classes just to try to figure this all out, what happened.
Isn't it something that when we're dealing with a tragedy like that, and with something that's so emotional and so it leaves us feeling so unsure, that one of the first human reactions is to try to make story out of that, to try to write things down. And a lot of times we feel like it's for us to try to process things, and so many other times that thing that we thought was just for us becomes for so many other people.
It's true. That's what happened to me. I was lucky enough to live in Boston, and there's an organization here called Grub Street. So I was able to sign up for classes. So I took writing classes for 10 years. I signed up for Memoir 1, Jumpstart Your Writing, Memoir 2. Then I said, well, fiction classes, personal essay classes, novel in progress classes, and 6 weeks, 6 essays. I can go on and on about all the classes that I took. But what happened is, by the end of all of that, I said, wow, now I feel like I have a story that I had to tell. And my story was a universal one. It's about marriage, losing a loved one, and the complex dynamics that make up a family.
Tell me about your publication, Jewish Magic Protected My Sister.
So that publication was in Lilith magazine. And what happened is, when my sister was first diagnosed with lung cancer, as I said, she was 43, and our family was sitting around the kitchen table at her house. And my father was wearing a chai around his neck, the Jewish symbol for life. And he took it off his head and he put it on my sister around her neck. And she started to squeeze it. So we felt like, okay, maybe this will protect her. Maybe, the chai. And then I started looking into the Kabbalah and the red string that people wore at the time, Madonna and other celebrities. And I spoke to the rabbi. And it was I wrote that essay because, we were looking for some drastic form of hope, even though, we knew there was no real magic, but we used those like symbols, like talismans, as a hope that they could save my sister.
And so you then told the story of that and it was published in the magazine?
Yeah, so I wrote that story. I wrote the story about how, we looked for some type of hope. And then I went to visit the rabbi, and he told me, I said, why do young people get diagnosed with cancer, a good person? And I know there's been many books written about that. But he couldn't, there was no answer. And then basically he said there's a prayer that he has found helpful called the Misha Berra prayer. And it's said every Saturday morning. And what happens is the congregation who is praying for the Shabbat, at the Shabbat services, anyone who has a person who is ill or someone they want to wish well, they mention their name. They mention their name during the service, and the community prays for that person. And it's a strong moment because you feel like you're doing something. So between that, and then I had a friend who went to Israel, and she put a note in the Western Wall, which was almost like God's mailbox, I called it in my story. So, praying for my sister. So that's how I wrote that essay, and it was published. It was published after she died.
I'm first off, I'm very sorry about the loss of your sister. That's tragic, and my heart goes out to you.
Thank you.
Telling that story after she had passed, and then sharing that experience with the world, and because up until this point, your writing and everything had been for you and maybe your family. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, it was mostly for me and my writing classes and different students in the classes.
So then taking that experience, putting it into words, and then sharing that with the world, that is a daunting task. But what did that do for you, for you personally, to share that story? But then what do you think it did for you, as a writer to encapsulate that, share it with the world, and then know that the story is no longer just yours?
Yeah, so, originally when I had this story, I was going to write it as a memoir. But then I changed my mind, because there were actually two parts of the story. So one was that my sister had died from lung cancer, and the other was that my husband and my family could barely even be in the same room together. The people I love most in this world. So I started writing different things to try to figure that all out. So in my writing classes, I decided that I was going to change my memoir into a fictionalized version of things that happened, and in that way, I could make scenes up that didn't happen really, and also I could have different characters say or do things that I wish they would have said or done in the truer version of the story, and and then I could make things up totally. So getting my story out there, even though it's inspired by a true story, like the actual, the inspiration for the story is true, but some of the facts and all of the scenes in it are not true, except for the ones about the cancer treatment for my sister. Those scenes are mostly true. So I really felt good about getting this out into the world, because I felt like I hope that it was a way to help me grieve, and my book was not written to hurt anyone, but I hope that I had hoped that appearances will inspire my readers to look at their own relationships and to put things in perspective in life, healing relationships that need help, and sharing experience with loved ones while they still can. And my book also talks about the power of forgiveness, and it reveals that everyone is really fighting their own demons. So, it shows that we all carry our own traumas with us, even though we try to move forward and enjoy our lives. But I feel like it's a very universal story. It's for anyone who's lost a loved one, anyone who had a close sister or brother relationship, anyone who has some marital conflict, and I feel like it could relate to a lot of people in this world.
Right. Well, and I read somewhere it said that this book was really about being a mother, daughter, sister, wife, and all of the complications and joy that comes from all of those different roles and how we interact with the people based on those roles. But what I found is the book is very much about how to be a son and father, husband, and brother as much as it is that, because these familial connections are the same. I mean, they express a little differently depending on our particular role. But it's all about family, and the family we inherit, and then the family that we make, and then the intersection of those two can a lot of times be very complicated. When you take two existing families and then meld and merge them together, and then start building an entirely new family, based on the tools that were given from the previous families, it's really complicated, and sometimes it's really beautiful, and sometimes it's full of stress and conflict.
You're right.
and I have a wife, and we have 3 daughters and 2 sons. So I see all of these roles with daughters and stuff. And, but my experience has been nearly the same, as what you described. By shifting the focus a little bit from what actually happened, but being absolutely informed by what did happen, did shifting the focus and changing the thread of story a bit, did that give you the freedom to talk about things that are maybe just a little too close in the way that memoir might have been constricting or stifling?
Yes, it did. As I said, that a lot of the characters, the main characters in the novel, let's say, for example, a scene happened. One of the characters was, in the hospital receiving chemotherapy, and being able to go out of memoir and making it into a novel, I was able to change the different reactions of and what the other characters would say during the book. It was much. I found writing the novel very freeing. I found that I was able to also examine my own behavior and some of my family's behavior in writing this and saying, wow, what if we did it this way? What would have happened? What if we didn't say a certain thing? Or what if we said something differently? How would the outcome have been? And I was able to examine just different ways of doing things that way. I didn't have to stick by exactly what happened, as you said.
Yeah. Did you talk to your family about this as you were writing or before you were writing? Did you ask permission, as it were?
Well, it's funny. I didn't ask permission. So what happened is I just told everyone I signed up for writing classes. And I said, I'm going to write a book. And this was about 10 years ago. But I had no idea how to write a book. I had written some essays and I had journaled, but I didn't know how to write a book. And I don't know if they really thought it would come to fruition of my book. I don't know if they did. But I did throughout the entire time. I told my husband, my mother, my brother-in-law, my daughter, my nieces and nephews. I said, I'm writing this story. And I said, it's, obviously it's inspired and it's based on what happened in our lives. But there are a lot of, dramatized versions of what happened. Some of the scenes were totally made up to propel the narrative forward. And it's not meant to hurt anyone. This book, it was really meant to help me grieve and make sense of what happened. And after 10 years of writing it and sending it out and then finally getting a publisher, and now it's going to be coming out. I mean, it's coming out right now. It's exciting for me. And some of them haven't read it. Some of them have read it. Some love it. I mean, the people who have read it, they love reading it. They said it's a page turner. They're excited about it, and a couple of family members have chosen not to read it, and that's their choice.
Right. Well, and that, that goes with purely fictional stories. The problem as writers is that we always put little pieces of ourselves in what we write. It's just who we are. What most people are surprised by is that the things they think, are us in the story a lot of times aren't. That's the great thing about writing fiction is you can embody other characters and work out emotions and problems and things like that. And, it's just not always what it seems to be.
That's exactly true. And in this book, I was able to put a few characters together, combine, different people it's not right. People will think, oh, that's me, but it's really not them. It's a combination of people. Right.
The book is a heavy read, in a lot of ways. I mean, this is serious, subject matter, not only, life-threatening, illnesses, but, the family interactions and complications and all of that stuff. But there are moments of levity in the book that ease us through the narrative, and, show us that humanity is not just in dealing with the dark things, but it's how we share in things. Was it a conscious effort on your part to have moments that allow the reader to breathe and to see all of the facets of the family?
Absolutely, because I didn't want to just write a cancer story, because otherwise I didn't want to just have people crying during the whole book. I wanted to show what it was like to live with cancer, and living with cancer. In my experience with my sister was, she did have a year of treatment, but then she had a year of a partial remission where she was just taking a pill to help her, and during that time. We were able to travel. We celebrated birthdays. We went out for dinner to nice restaurants. And the children were bat mitzvahed, and we had parties, and so we were able to really go. We tried to make, in the novel, I wanted to show that, people's lives do go on. Clothes have to be hemmed, pants have to be hemmed, and clothes have to be washed, and birthdays have to be celebrated, and trips. It's nice to go on a family vacation. So I purposely included all of these things in my story, because really that's what life is. It's a combination of good and unfortunately bad.
Well, and the weird thing is life goes on with or without us, and pieces of us continue on in others, and it's a strange and fragile thing that life is.
It's so true. It's like life goes on. It's just life goes on. But I do remember the day that my own sister was diagnosed with cancer. It's like I looked at life differently. Even on a sunny day, people having conversations, walking down the street. What used to look normal to me then, it just seemed odd to me. Like, how could they be smiling and laughing as they're walking down the street? But now, after writing and experience everything, I understand life goes on.
Sondra, when someone finishes this book, when they're closing the back cover and they're left with these characters that will, inevitably become part of us, the reader, at the end, what do you hope that we are left with when we have finished the story and then carry on?
Well, I hope that people are left with seeing how important family is, I guess, because family has always been important to me, and I feel like my novel emphasizes the importance of family, despite everything that threatens to tear it apart. And I also feel that my novel emphasizes the power of forgiveness. And, doesn't come right away. It doesn't always happen. But, everyone is fighting their own demons. So I hope that people will see that the characters in this story, they weren't perfect, but they're human. And people deal with life situations the way that they know, the way that maybe their parents have dealt with it, or the way they think that they're doing the best job that they can. So I feel like my book really talks about humanity, and that people aren't perfect, but we're human, and we do try the best we can.
Well said. The book is called Appearances, and it is available everywhere now when you're hearing this. Sondra, if people are just learning about you and want to find out more, dig in, follow as news becomes available of your upcoming work, is there a place where they can connect with you online?
Yeah, so I have a website, sondrahelene.com, and I'm on Facebook at Sondra Helene, and I'm on Twitter at Sondra Helene, and Instagram Sondra Helene, and I have a pretty strong social media influence.
It's fantastic. Sondra, we'll put links to all that in the show notes, and we're going to send everybody to pick up their copy of Appearances. Sondra, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Oh, thank you, Hank. This was great. I really enjoyed talking about Appearances, and I enjoyed talking with you.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
The ancient building wore the severe cassock colors of a Puritan minister, a uniform monochrome of slate-gray shingles and soot-gray clapboards, its shadowed upper windows cross-hatched like the facets of a spider's eye. The second story protruded beyond the first and bore the house's only ornament, 2 gray teardrops of wood, weeping from each corner of the building's stiff upper lip. The place would have looked sinister and foreboding in its shadowed alley if not for the die-cut silhouette of a dancing sheep, jaunty above the door, and the 2 front bay windows that blazed with colorful, welcoming light. The windows were hung with orbs of colored glass on staggered lengths of ribbon. Each orb glowed with autumnal reds and delicate greens, burgundy tints and pumpkin hues, dappled raspberry and clover lime, streaked with light and weightless as bubbles over a cauldron. The shelves below offered crystal skulls and silver daggers and horny devils, Celtic chalices and woven dream catchers in dreamcoat hues. A primitive broom leaned in a corner, ready for flight, and a rhapsodic nude in bronze clutched her goat-legged lover beneath a jackal bust of Anubis. The interior of the shop was even witchier. Above a crude and sooty fireplace, a stack of brick barely holding the shape of a chimney pushed through the barn-high roof, threading ancient beams that crisscrossed overhead. Brooms and kettles and Christmas lights dangled from these, alongside Halloween costumes and Chinese umbrellas, pointy hats and bundles of herbs. Jason wandered deeper into the shop. His fingers trailed across strange bronze statuary and Aztec masks of turquoise and lapis lazuli. He rolled his eyes at the luck candles and money charms, but goggled indecently at a nude and anatomically correct silver nymph with long golden hair that reminded him of Kate. "See anything you like?" Jason jumped, turned, and jumped again. The woman standing before him was the living embodiment of every hippy-dippy counterculture type he'd ever seen. Her hair was green, her face pale and round, her doughy body wrapped in some elaborately woven ethnic garb. Her eyebrows were black and pierced in little rows, and her eyes were heavily circled with midnight blue, as if she'd been sucker-punched by an oil slick. She tapped the glass over the nymph. "Admiring the goddess, I see." She'd practically caught him with porn. "You want to hold her? She won't break. Here." The woman flipped open a glass door and handed Jason the naked figure. "See how heavy she is? You could bang her against the wall all day and barely make a dent." She waggled her eyebrows, obviously enjoying his discomfort. He checked the price tag. $700? "The goddess is a symbol of love and fertility. Don't be ashamed of desiring her." The woman's long green fingernails plucked a long black cigarette from a long red case, and she lit it. "I sense," she blew smoke and studied its whorls, "dissatisfaction in love. Yes? I have just the thing." She pulled Jason into a side room where the smell of her clove smoke gave way to the skunky aromas of potpourri sachets, tea leaves, and hanging clutches of twiggy flowers. She searched, found a little bundle, and pressed it into his hand. "This will make you irresistible. Rub it on your nethers twice a day, and love shall surely find you." Jason made a face. The bundle smelled like cow manure. He didn't even want that on his hands.
Flesh, Blood, Steel, the new book from David Allen Jones. 16-year-old Jake Harris wakes up after a horrific car accident to find 13 years have come and gone. He's 29 years old, a cyborg, and one of the world's most feared assassins. Horrified by the things he's done, things he can't remember, Jake vows never to kill again. Unfortunately, the company that owns Jake has other plans. They're not about to lose their top hitman to the errant memories of his teenage self. When Jake manages to escape them, they launch a worldwide manhunt that ranges from a near-future New York City to Paris. Desperate to remain himself, Jake joins a rebel faction dedicated to wresting control of the world's governments from the hands of militarized corporations. Using his enhanced body and perceptions, he is able to aid them in their fight. But Jake doesn't realize the rebels have their own plans for him, ones that involve unleashing his unique talents on their enemies. Faced with a dark past he can't recall and uncertain whom he should trust, Jake must come to terms with the sinister choices that molded him into the man he became. Question is, can he avoid doing it all again? Assassins aren't born, they're programmed. Flesh, Blood, Steel by David Allen Jones.